Hey everybody, this is Aaron the Pedantic. Basically, yesterday was the last day of my 5th edition D&D campaign. Um, some of you may be aware that 5th edition is not really my favorite system, um, but it's still a damn good one. Um, what I wanted to do here is really more for my players than anything else. Basically, I wanted to kind of look back at everything that happened in our game. So for a lot of people, this is probably going to be incredibly boring. But if you were part of the game, maybe like this will kind of mean something to you, and you'll get a little bit of what it was like from my perspective. I would actually love to do this with the whole crew, but unfortunately, it's kind of a time thing and it's also a bandwidth thing. We can do voice chat fairly easily, but whenever I get cameras involved, my computer starts to die. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to get a better computer that can handle all this shit more. But that is not today. So basically, my 5th edition campaign started um, as a system. Like I had no exact system in mind. I was really trying to get an OSR game going, but I wasn't trying that hard. Really, I was just kind of like, oh, I've got this particular adventure I want to run, and people weren't really buying into it that much on a local level. And then I was like, you know what? This was at a time when I had started to realize that it was helpful to be a little bit more explicit with like the fact that I welcome anybody to my table. No matter who you are, what your background is, you're safe basically, as long as you are good to everyone else around. So um, we ended up having a lot of really cool players that I'd never played with before, and um, basically one of them had requested, I really want to play 5e, and I was like, oh. But at the same time, they're a trans person, and they were saying that they had a hard time finding a group that they really felt comfortable with. And basically, I was like, well, I really want to like help them feel comfortable in a game. So I was like, all right, we'll do 5th edition. I'll try and kind of do it my way. I'll try to embrace what it is, rather than trying to resist it and make it more deadly, more low powered, and all that kind of stuff. I was like, you know what? I'll just embrace what it is. So what I did was I created a setting that was basically like if Rome was a fantasy setting, more or less. Like if you injected magic into it. So basically, you ended up having this huge city state. Well, I don't city state. That's more of a Greek thing. You had this huge empire. Completely wrong thing. A huge empire that had conquered all this continent for the most part, and there were all these outlying communities that were part of the empire, and they had to pay into it, but the empire kind of took care of them, and um, basically it was there was a symbiotic relationship, more or less. And what I thought about was interesting, because at the time I was like teaching about Rome in some capacity for one of my class. Oh, Julius Caesar. That's why. So, like, one of the things that really interested me was the concept of bread and circus, or like bread and like basically you give them a little bit to eat. You give them something to entertain them, and it like really takes their attention. So, and the reason this kind of popped in my head was because the player that I was talking about before said that she would really appreciate it if we could have like maybe a circus troupe or something like that. And I was like, well, you know what? I could totally build a campaign around that. I think we could do that. And from the onset, I was like, I'm going to make this a very story-centered experience, which is completely antithetical to what I usually do. I'm an old school guy, so story is usually an afterthought. You try and create the setting particular to the stuff that you want to do, but then you let them, run rampant in the setting. You don't herd the cats really that much. You might put them in a place where it's intentionally herded, a dungeon. But you don't really rein them in. You don't try and push story beats or plot points or anything like that. They're just people living in a world. That's what I usually do. So I was like, you know what, this could be interesting. So we went with that. Everybody created characters. So at this point, we had, and this was long enough ago that I, okay, I do remember his name. So we had a player named Andrew who was playing this Luxodon. Was he a tarot reader? I think he was a tarot reader, and he was some kind of weird unearthed arcana subclass that I don't even remember at this point. I like basically when people came to me, I was like, I don't give a shit. Just do whatever you want. I don't even care, because with fifth edition, I was really fed up with trying to be restricting. I was just like, this game is like kind of inherently fucked unless I want to take away what a lot of people love about it. So like why do that? I think I would rather just use a different system if I'm going to be restricting. So in any case, I was like, sure, you do that. My wife Chelsea was playing a very spoiled aristocrat girl who was from the big empire city, um, and she was just destined for stardom, basically. So she was an acrobat, a very kind of pompous individual. There was, I'm trying to remember who else was in the original group. So there was Andrew, there was Chelsea. Uh, God, oh well, of course, there was. Oh gosh, names are escaping me, and it's really sad. So his name isn't Keith, is it? I think it's Keith. Keith played. Yeah, it is Keith. Keith played a fuck. What's it called? An artificer. The thing that I despise, of course. He did a great job with it. It was really entertaining. Basically, he was like a little gnome artificer that rode on this mechanical badger all over the place, and or maybe it was a badger or a ferret. But he had this thing that he would do when basically he would like just kind of catch things that people say in his little magical stone and record it, and then he just repeat it back to them to the point where it kind of became a meme. There was like Justice Will Be Swift and some other one, and it was pretty entertaining. And then there was Willow, who was a barbarian that was, I think, raised by halflings or something like that. And Willow was a human. Willow is basically a roadie, so that was a cool character. But we started with the whole troop thing, and I had this idea. I was like, so I'm gonna have this real flamboyant leader of the troop that is basically like the manager. Like I kind of had the American Horror Story um, person in mind. If you ever seen Freak Show, so basically, Paul, not Sarah, no, not Sarah Paulson, the old Jessica Lange. I think that's her name. So basically, that character is kind of who I had in mind, but just imagine that she was just a gorgeous vampire, but nobody knew she was a vampire. She just acted like she was very fair complected and didn't really care for the sun and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so my idea was basically that it would be a traveling crew thing. They would go to all kinds of different cities, and there would be new things to deal with. They would travel and see the sights and all those kinds of things. And pretty early on, and we did that for a little bit. It was really cool. One of the things that I had happen was like there were these little encounters they had. They're in the middle of a show, so they need to do their performance. There's a point where somebody starts acting kind of rough, so the body. Oh, Avogandos! I'm like, oh, I can't believe I forgot about Avogandos. Avogandos is played by Zach, and Avogandos was there from the beginning. So anyway, Avogandos was a drow bodyguard to the leader of the troop, whose name was Priscilla. So the trusted bodyguard was basically trying to keep rowdy people at bay. And so there's a point where he had to diffuse a situation, and there were just like little things here and there that popped up that they had to deal with, and depending on how those all panned out, it would like kind of change what their payday was at the end of the day, and who becomes the favorite of the troop leader and all that kinds of stuff. And so we actually, I think we only did the one performance, and then I was like, okay, so what I wanted to do was pretty early on. I wanted to like establish these huge stakes that really pull them in. So I was like, all right, you guys have this one chance where you go to the capital, and basically you are going to play this big show. You have this very rare opportunity because basically their troop has been stuck in the middle of, bumfuck Egypt for ages, and their chance to make it big finally arrives because of the fact that all of a sudden it turns out that all of the other troops that were scheduled to perform at this event, just enough of them were poisoned to basically make it where it was necessary for them to call on some of the lesser known troops. So they had this one big shot to make it big, and so everything was really riding on that. Now, what happened is they went to the big city, and there was some kind of cool stuff on the way that we dealt with. Basically, there was a very interesting encounter with a Robin Hood esque figure that I thought was going to go incredibly different. It was the whole stereotypical, you find a tree knocked over in the middle of your path, and there's an ambush, all these archers and stuff. And I was all expecting for there to be like negotiation and like trying to calm things down, maybe like join his side, all that kind of stuff. And basically what happened was they were like, no, fuck it. And basically Avogandos just went straight up to this guy and, like put a sword to his throat. And he's like, okay, okay. Like some of the other ones just very quickly killed some of the bandits. And I was surprised at the fact that they took law and order as their creed so quickly. I was like, what the fuck? Part of that's because my last campaign they basically fucked up civilizations, which is usually what happens. So anyway, they captured Robin Hood guy. They were going to turn him in for some money. Had a little side thing that happened one week whenever most people weren't able to show up, where basically there was this thing with Chelsea and Zach. They played with Zach's mom, and there's this little side event where they ended up in the midst of this like horrible werewolf-like creature and some big ass giant that could very easily kill them. And they ended up tricking the giant and finding out that the werewolf was actually just a cursed guardian of this sleeping hag. It was a neat little excursion, and the Zach's mom was able to play D&D for the first time, and she was a sweet old lady, so that was pretty fun. Anyway, so the thing that happened after that, they get to the city. This was probably like session 4, I'm guessing. They get to the big city. They get to experience it a little bit. There's some good times that are had. They go to a bar to meet who they find out is basically a mob boss. Well, she's a senator, so her name is Julia, and she's in like chummy with Priscilla, and basically reminds Priscilla, how much is riding on this performance and all that kind of stuff. And so what the players didn't know is that Priscilla basically kind of made some arrangements with the mob there that they would make sure that her troop was finally able to have their time in the spotlight. And Priscilla owes them now. So basically the idea that Priscilla had in mind was to make a whole lot of money, after having a wonderful performance, and then basically just paying it back slowly. And then she's got the recognition that she always wanted. Well, so they did the performance, And well, and I also introduced knives at that point. Whenever they were at the tavern, which it was less of a tavern and more like a nightclub. Um, the whole feel of the setting was very steampunky, but also kind of like modern in some ways, but then also kind of like Roman Empire in other ways. It's kind of all over the place, but it was pretty cool the way that I had it set up. Anyway, so they finish up at the nightclub, after meeting Knives, who was just really like meh, just being a tough guy, and they do the performance, and Chelsea's character did phenomenal, like amazing. Everybody else fucking bombed. It was bad. It was bad. Um, and so I was kind of like, you know what? It seems like they might be fine on account of the fact that Chelsea's character did fine and all that kind of stuff, and I was kind of like on the fence about whether or not they really succeeded. And then so either way, the whole campaign was going to be them trying to make money for the mob. Um, well, it turns out that Chelsea, like I said, she's my wife. She kind of got a little bit too busy to play any further. So just because of work schedule and all that kind of stuff, and she was just too tired most of the time. So she resigned from the campaign. So I had kind of two options there. I was like, the only person that really did well is no longer playing in the game anymore. Um, so, like she was the rising starlet that everybody was interested in, and I was kind of thinking to myself, why wouldn't like the other people just poach her, to join a better troop? And so I was kind of like, all right, I like where this is going. So I was like, now what are the ramifications of this? So there are all these hangers on, that are part of Priscilla's troop. And so basically, Priscilla and um, well, yeah, I guess it wasn't actually Priscilla that did this, but the group decided they wanted to try and raise some money after they figured out, that they owed money. So they took a job posting, and I had this very Indiana Jones like character, and it's funny because like there are so many characters that like I tried to portray as kind of like dashing and all that kind of stuff, and then the group would just be like they would just belittle the fuck out of them. It was kind of funny, but so he basically was like, oh, I'm about to go out there, and I'm sure I can handle it, but if y'all want to tag along, that's fine or whatever. And they're like, fuck you, we don't need you. And so they said, we're taking the job. So they went separately, and because Chelsea was gone, and I think, oh yeah, Andrew was gone at that point. Um, because of that, I sought out more players. So actually, I think that's when. No, we already had Keith and Willow. Um, we had Huxley. Huxley joined, and I believe that Rudy joined at that time too. Or she may have joined a little bit before. I think she did join a little bit before. So Rudy was played by Kaylee, and then Huxley was played by Ronnie. And so they joined at that point. And like I said, this was probably like 5 sessions in at this point. So they basically there was this mansion that was uh, cursed somehow, some kind of horrific curse, and they were tasked with trying to dispel it. At that point, basically the Empire, the soldiers had barricaded the fuck out of it. If you ever played the game Neverwinter Nights, it's kind of like how they had Neverwinter. I mean, it's like you would do during a plague or something like that. If you just quarantine everybody, you just put all this shit and don't let anybody out. It's basically the same thing. And instead of a plague, it was like just a whole bunch of undead, more or less. So the mansion that they were going to had all kinds of crazy shit going on, and
it was a really cool it was a really cool ordeal. Uh, and I, for the first time in a while, basically I took a monster out of one of the 5e books and I just went fucking wild with it. So if you look in, gosh, I think it's in Volo's guide. There is the Grim Jester or something to that effect. Basically, it's an undead jester character, and one of the things that's really like hilarious about him is he can watch you, and if you heal somebody in front of him, he can make it do damage instead. So like I was just waiting for the opportunity to be able to use this. It's so fucking mean. It is so mean, you know. Somebody's unconscious and they're like, "Oh shit, I got you, buddy. I got you, buddy." And then you're like, "Nah, that's two failed saving throws instead." Cuz it's cruel. It's cruel, I know. But it's entertaining. Um anyway, so I decided to really lean into that. So I was like, all right, well, why would this kind of thing exist? And I was like, okay, well, maybe he's cursed, really fucking cursed, because his family's been doing all kinds of fucked up shit. And then so I kind of went deeper into like the cosmology of bad stuff going on in this world. Because honestly, like whenever I started out, and I've done this with this entire world on several continents, I typically take a very uh, bottom up approach. You know, I'm just like here's like the important area that you're at, and then I'm gonna flesh out like broad strokes of what's the whole place is like, and then I just kind of fill in the gaps as I go. And usually it's like I'll have like some problems for you to deal with. So in my last campaign, I was like, all right, there's slavery really bad. You know, there's poor people really bad. You know, there's all these kinds of things. But really, I was trying to push like a hunters guild type game in that one, so they could move up in the world and become famous hunters and all that kind of stuff. Instead, they ended up overthrowing the whole nation and dismantling slavery and just blowing shit up. But anyway, in this campaign, it was at that point just kind of like make money, uh, make them dollar bills, pay it back, don't get killed by the mob, more or less. Oh, sorry. So I hadn't really put much thought into that kind of thing, and then so I kind of developed this whole thing. I was like, all right, so you have this insane person. Wasn't always insane, but something drove him crazy. The basically he was a rich dude who took an excursion to a nearby jungle. He recovered some kind of artifact. And the artifact is just like extremely fucking cursed, and it made him just go fucking crazy. He started worshiping this demon lord, and then he was all about trying to bring him back. And in order to do it, he had to just kill bukus of people and try and make a connection to the abyss, more or less, and try and break him free somehow. First, you got to get there, and then you got to break him free. And I was like, this is a demon lord that has been imprisoned, that is like basically stuck, and there needs to be seals lifted in order to make it happen. So kind of, if you've watched Supernatural, it's kind of like going with the whole the lifting of the seals kind of thing. So kind of these obscure acts that have to be performed in order to make it work. So that is kind of what I did. Um, Now, what ended up happening was they went to this place. It was very thoroughly fucked up. They had some very cool encounters. Like there was this one where they're riding in their carriages, and the wheel gets blown off, and basically they ended up fighting this really fucked up. I can't even remember what it was. I use a lot of creatures, and I have no idea what they're supposed to be. I don't really use them the way that the books say. I'll just be like, oh, stat block. I'll use that for this. It's got those features. I'm probably going to replace that with this. It's by itself, and is it supposed to be tough? All right. It's got legendary actions. I'm giving it more hit die. That kind of thing. I play very loosey goosey with all that stuff. Um, So I got no fucking clue what that thing was. I want to say it was like a bar guest or something. But anyway, it was a very nefarious motherfucker, and the whole place is just full of zombies and death and all those kinds of things. Um, and so there's this really cool fight while they were riding in carriages with this undead, dilapidated carriage beside them, and it was just fucking cool. But anyway, so they got through that. We they arrived at the estate. They found the Indiana Jones guy who apparently got there first. And what they found was that he was talking to this girl on a gondola next to like a pool of water. And I was actually using the I can't remember what they're fucking called, but it's basically the girl that's gonna pull you underwater and drown you, basically. And I think I did some rolls because I don't typically like to just be like, oh, this happens, this happens, this happens. Whenever it's not PCs. Uh, but at the same time, I also don't want to like take too long. One of the things that's really annoying is if you're sitting there and the DM's basically playing with themselves, right? So it was just like a saving throw. It's just like, all right, yeah, get a saving throw to see if it happens this round. And so anyway, he gets pulled under. They ended up saving his life, but not before. Oh, Chelsea was still there. I think Chelsea was still there because her character almost drowned, saving him. Because I had the girl, then I also had some water weirds that were making it worse, basically. It was very, very delicious trap. So she almost drowned to death. It was beautiful. But she survived. Damn it. So anyway, that whole thing happened. After they rescued the Indiana Jones guy, they bound him with rope and they tossed him in their carriage and had their driver look after him. So then they decided to start kind of investigating the place. They decided to hit the greenhouse first, I think. I think that's where they went first. But anyway, the greenhouse thing was a lot of fun because, again, I was trying to use very deadly encounters. Very deadly encounters. So there were basically these trees that came to life with this kind of wicked negative energy. And, again, the Joker, the Jester, is loitering around this place. They'd already encountered him once, and, they had this real weird, funny. Basically, I would have him pester them, and, they would try to hurt him. He'd run away, and, they could never kill him because he's not really killable. And he would never hurt them directly, but he would just fuck with them. That's kind of how I excused the fact that he was basically immortal. So anyway, even though Huxley at one point did like 100 points of smite damage on him, like, and when I say at one point, I mean like during uh, that mansion thing. So a lot of damage. Anyway, so while they're in the greenhouse, basically they're looking around, and all of a sudden everything starts coming to life, and it really seemed to fuck with him. And there was this really, really precarious point where they were looking absolutely fucked. Like, basically, their strongest fighter, and I think I forgot to mention him at this point, Alexander, played by Garrett, who he's basically a rogue-lock. He's got the Great Old One. So Alexander is an asshole. He's got expertise in oh shit, what's it called? Not performance, persuasion. He has the actor feat. He has like basically where he can communicate telepathically. So basically, his shtick was he would talk to you in your head in your own voice. And so there are really two ways I could go with that. I could either be like, all right, well, you're gonna know the difference, like between your own head talk and someone else making it happen, or I could have said, it works. And so what I ended up doing was I was like, it works. It doesn't mean you're automatically convincing. It's not mind control, but it can make people think that they're crazy. And he used it on everybody for a while. He used it on the other players. It drove them crazy. He would basically make the jester's voice in their heads. So he was kind of being the bad guy of the group, like making everything worse for all of them. He ended up kind of like changing the tone of the character a little bit later on, which I think ended up working better. But for a while, he was really like stirring some shit. Anyway, so at that point, he was basically being held by a tree ant. A tree ant? Tree ant. And the other ones were like either unconscious or like basically being battered. Like at that point, Avogandos was almost knocked out. Somebody, I think Huxley was. I think Huxley might have been. I think he was fine, but everybody else was dying basically. So it was really close to killing somebody, but Avogandos is like, no, 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 I'm going to jump in the way. Mechanically speaking, there really wasn't anything that would make that happen, but I'm like, I mean, you could do that in real life, so why not? So basically, Avogandos just started taking a shit ton of damage. And like I said, Alexander was on his last legs, really, all that kind of stuff. So what I had done whenever I wrote the encounter, because I knew this was going to be really fucking hard, is basically I gave them a chance to get out of it, and I was like, what would like inspire the jester to do this, to make it where it's something that could be gotten out of. And I was thinking if it's just funny, right? So basically what he did was he wrote in Sylvan, and again, this was something I didn't know for sure if anybody like knew the language, because I don't think we had any elves. I don't think. Well, you don't get that anyway. You're from being elvish. But I was like, he's gonna write it in Sylvan because they're tree ants, and basically it's going to say the safe word is banana. So I was like, because it's kind of like a BDSM thing. He's probably a kinky motherfucker, and he's just trying to fuck with them and get them to say banana. So I mean, they could have won the fight potentially if they were really careful without having to worry about that. But basically, what happened was at the last moment, and I had kind of indicated it to them before that there was writing on this parchment that was like stuck into one of the trees. So Alexander, when he's about to die, he's like, I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna read it. And then so I read it to him. I was like, so it says the password is banana, or the safe word. I'm sorry, the safe word is banana. And so he says banana, and then all of the trees basically wither and die. So they like narrowly survived that one. It was looking pretty bad. Like genuinely, I thought it was going to be a TPK. That was still in kind of the earlier levels where TPKs are more probable. I think they were probably like maybe level 5 around then. So anyway, they did that. They went inside the mansion. They found out that it was haunted as a motherfucker. And this was after some kind of like detective work where they're like kind of sensing around. Huxley was using his divine sense a whole lot, trying to find where the undead was at. That was a pretty regular thing for him. So I was like, you can sense the undead under you. So basically, the jester was actually hiding out, and there was a secret compartment where they could have gone after him, and it would have actually led into another part of the manor. And I put like a real crazy eldritch book down there because, like I said, the owner of the place had just gone fucking mental and dove real deep into the Lovecraft realm, more or less. And they didn't end up going down there, which is really sad because whenever the tree ants and all that triggered, it was whenever Avogandos was like, oh, I think I'm gonna like check. Well, what is that back there? And he was checking that out, and then that's whenever shit got crazy. So I was really sad that they didn't follow up on that. Anyway, so they went into the manor itself, and they found blood in a lot of places. They found a lot of ghosts. They ended up beating the shit out of a bunch of children's ghosts. And I was like, what? Like, they were just so fucking violent. It was insane. So they did some ghost busting. Then they kind of like found out this was one of my more fucked up places. Honestly, I tend to like including like a real fucked up place every now and then. I kind of I'll have fucked up place, and then I'll have maybe a few kind of more tame places to kind of like let the palate sit back down. And then I'll just fucked up again. I usually try and make sure that they're the kind of players that are up for that, though. I don't just, I'm not just going to get a group of, let's have a lot of fun. And I'm just like, death and decay, that whole thing. But by fucked up, I mean basically the kids were all murderers, just like their dad. um, and so, yeah, they wanted to kill the party. But I didn't get the chance to trick them because they all went on this ghost hunting rampage. They're blasting china cabinets and shit that they're hiding in. And anyway, so they checked the place out. They ended up finding the big painting in the big room that was covered up. And of course, curiosity. So they pull off the covering of the painting, and it sucks them into the abyss. So the abyss actually was specifically a portion of the abyss that was basically prison, more or less. It's kind of like a dimension specifically for demons that are imprisoned. So it's not just like going to where most of them live. And so they went to the one where Abraxas is. So they started like just trying to kind of checking it out. More or less, the layout was kind of like this enormous bridge, like in the middle of nowhere with just snow everywhere, like hundreds of miles up in the air, and it was very like Dark Soulsy in a way. And then so that basically at the end of this bridge, there's this shrine with like a throne, and then you have this giant figure sitting there stuck. And of course, the players wanted to stab it first, which that's always a good idea, because they're trapped in this painting world as far as they knew, and they had no idea how to get out of there. I don't even remember exactly how they got out of there, to be honest. Um, yeah, I've got no fucking clue. How did they get out of there? Huh. Story for another time, I guess. Maybe they remember. Anyway, so one of the things that I kind of played with. So Abraxas is actually it's a Forgotten Realms thing, which I usually hate Forgotten Realms, but I pull their stuff in occasionally if there's something I like. And what I liked about that was it was this demon lord that apparently could put an end to all magic, and I was like, ooh, 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 because one of the things I like to do is I like to use the same campaign world over and over and over again. And so there's just this evolving history. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to put this motherfucker in here because, for the fail state of the game, it can trigger an apocalypse with no magic, more or less. And I'm like, perfect for, my next game that could be entirely magicless or where magic is just very dangerous, hard to use, all those kinds of things. Very much not D&D. I was already kind of like on my way out with D&D as far as that goes. So that's kind of what I went with. And kind of playing around with that, I'm like, well, if he's kind of like the master of magic and all that kind of stuff, there would probably be all kinds of forbidden magic that he would know. So one of the things I did was I was like, okay, there's this weird like eldritch writing all over this statue. And then motherfucker Alexander, he's like, "Oh, I have the invocation, Eyes of the Runekeeper. I can read any language." And I'm like, "Okay, but you're not gonna like it." So basically, he had to do some saving throws, and in order to withstand the knowledge that was being given to him. And by the end of it, he had this new gift. I can't remember what the fuck it was though. I want to say it was the one where basically he could animate zombies. I think that's the one. It was just like a gift where you can animate zombies, but it was also kind of like a corrupting influence. And it was kind of like the first domino on the way for him uh, resurrecting the great old one, even though they're not really connected with each other per se. Um, so uh, they ended up getting out of the place. Um, and again, I have no idea how because they don't have that particular ability. Um, oh, I want to say that there was just something that they figured out that was built into the place, but I kind of doubt it. They might have been rescued by somebody. I built some kind of way out. That's all I can really remember. I built a way out, and there was while they were there, they were being harassed by this little fire creature. It was basically just like a living flame, but they killed that pretty easily. So they get out. Um, Whenever they get out, they get back to their troop to find that they are all in the process of being murdered. So Priscilla is gone. They find Knives and company murdering their friends. And, these are indeed friends. So it's not just nameless NPCs. We had the, I can't remember his name at the moment, Barjon. That's right. Barjon, the halfling strongman, which was a character that they really loved. In fact, Keith's character, um, I can't remember his fucking name. Orin. Keith's character, Orin, actually was pledging to get him a new eye because Barjon was missing an eye and he used an eye patch. But yeah, so they were in the process of being murdered, and I don't know why I was so dumb to think that the players would sit and listen to an explanation from Knives, but for some fucking reason I believed that. They did not listen to it. They immediately attacked him. They killed the other individuals. It was a grueling ass battle, and it was one that I really didn't think they would be able to win. But they beat the shit out of them. And Knives was basically on his way out. He was about to die, and it came down to like one of those moments where I'm having to adjudicate, you know, basically this kind of chase sequence, where he's running and he's invisible. They don't know exactly where he's at, but they're going to drop down an AoE and just kind of hope that that's where he's at. And so, like, then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to try and figure out exactly where I would put him, because we were using maps at the time, I believe. And, they're really, well, I think we were using maps at the time. But anyway, what I ended up doing was I kind of used probabilities. I was like, so there's this much space there. You cover up this much space. So there's like this much chance you'd be able to hit him based on how much space is there. So they rolled it, and they just barely missed. And that was after they had like a shot before he went invisible, I think, where they could have gotten him, and he just barely got away. So I was prepared to let him die right then. I don't use plot armor for my villains. They run whenever they need to, but if the players are ingenious enough to keep them from escaping, they deserve that. I'm not going to prolong the game. So anyway, he got away, and they were fucking pissed. They wanted him dead so bad. He's probably one of my more successful villains because of that. Well, probably between him and the Jester. But so both of them were in this campaign. Anyway, so at this point, one of the major players, Willow, who was one of the ones that kind of convinced me to start the game in the first place, basically was kind of missing a lot. And it was kind of obvious that Willow was like she was about to start leaving the group, and that was going on. There was just some other shit. I kind of felt like it was getting kind of stagnant. It wasn't exactly what we were intending. It was still entertaining, so I can't say that it wasn't. But at the same time, like, it wasn't like quite what I wanted, and I kind of felt like it was basically becoming something that I don't think they wanted. because more or less at that point it was more like a vengeance mission, kind of thing. So it was going to be like they're on the run in this place, in this capital, and it would be a very stressful ordeal, not very not a whole lot of freedom and all that kind of stuff, and I could kind of see that going, but at that point I was still like treading on, so they were basically hiding in the sewers. Um, After like right after they almost killed Knives, I introduced this NPC named Alona. So Alona was a priestess of Apollo. So Apollo being the god of like truth and foresight and all those kinds of things. Um, Basically, she had premonitions. She had foresight. She had all these things, and she went to them and said, like, I know what's going on. We have the same enemy, and I can shed light on some secrets for you and help you, reach your goal. So at that point, it was kind of like, they didn't know it, but Knives and Julia were swept up in this whole Abraxas thing, trying to bring him back, and so it was going to be, like this whole epic thing, which I don't really care for the epic stuff too much, but I was trying to give them what I thought they wanted. So um, then they went underground with Alona, and they had this kind of like this period of time where they were traveling through the sewers and they fought troglodytes and all this kind of shit. And so then it was actually they ended up meeting. Uh, Alona said there was the scion of Apollo that they were going to meet, or the avatar of Apollo. I think it was the avatar of Apollo. And so basically, it was this holy figure that was, bestowing um, blessings and miracles and kind of guiding them. And so this whole idea I had was that basically, so the Apollo disciples would serve the emperor by, constantly using their gift of foresight to determine if any assassination attempts would occur. Because I mean, why wouldn't he? So more or less, what they ended up doing was they started using simulacrum on themselves, so that they could leave a clone there to serve him, while they could go off and do their business in the sewers and try and lead this resistance against Julia and Knives and the cult of Abraxas, more or less. So that was kind of what I was getting them into. But what Alona didn't know, and what the group didn't know, was that the avatar of Apollo was actually a beholder that was constantly using modify memory to make Alona forget that it wasn't indeed the avatar of Apollo. It was this big ass beholder named Bezel Gerfengergen. I don't know, some kind of really long, weird ass name that purposely I was like, I'm going to have a weird fucking name because they're very alien. So I actually had to rehearse that name quite often to get it down. Anyway, so they meet this beholder, and much to my pleasure and surprise, they didn't try to kill it immediately. They actually listened to it. And it was a really cool encounter. But it was also at that point where, like I said, I was starting to realize where things were going. And I started realizing that things could be different. So that was whenever we were introduced to Maddie. So Maddie is, at that point, our new player. And Maddie, and I have like this really long conversation. We're talking about stuff. And I'm like, I could really use a player that maybe like tries to stir the others to action more, perhaps, or like get them to be more interactive. Because like some of the sessions had felt kind of like slow, I guess, like people were kind of afraid to do anything. I don't know. And then it kind of like spiraled, that conversation spiraled into like, what if we just say, fuck this whole campaign and then just reboot the whole thing? So what we did is I was like, so we're going to introduce your character. and they don't know it, but your character is actually coming into this place to free them. And so the whole thing is they were all cursed with this. It's basically it's like an astral projection thing, but it actually makes them have another life. So they're not like just like a projection. It like gives them a material form, and if they stay in it long enough, eventually that becomes the real them, and then the old version of them dies. So basically, Armamir, which is Maddie's character, went into this place, which is in the real world. So these things are really happening, but nobody knows that these people don't belong. And Armamir is rescuing the other ones, and they don't remember, what their previous lives were. So it was a complete mind fuck because, of course, Armamir, Maddie and I were the only ones who knew about this plan. The other ones just had to. The only thing that they knew is that there was going to be a reboot and they were going to be in a new place. But they didn't know how it was going to happen. In fact, they showed up at the table expecting that we were going to start in a new place. And I kind of threw them for a loop because then I start the session and I'm like, okay, so you're in the caves before Bezel Bergengorf and or whatever. What do you do? And then they're like, what? And I was like, yeah. So, and they're like, but what about my new? And I'm like, hold on. We'll get there. So we did this really cool thing where it was just like the Matrix, honestly. They had to find the exit. That basically disconnected their soul from this particular form, and brings them back. And so, meanwhile, they had done some other stuff down there in the caves. They were looking for Priscilla, who was supposedly down there. They actually saved her, and then they left. They left this whole place. So we never actually got to pick up on Priscilla, sadly. So they never got to really dive into the whole, she's a vampire thing. We just kind of skipped over that. But so anyway, it was a really cool session. I think a lot of these sessions are on the channel. It's probably not all that interesting to listen to, but just in case somebody wants to listen to it, it's the whole Elise campaign and the Salura campaign. So Elise was the Empire. Salura is where they wake up. So basically, after they're pulled out of this place, some of their bodies are a little different. So Rudy, at that point, becomes a little bit younger. I think she became younger. Her classes changed a little bit. Huxley went from a Loki worshiper and patron, not patron, the reverse of that, subject, I guess, to a, what was the other? Fuck. We were using Egyptian gods here. I can't remember. Oh no, he didn't use Egyptian. He went with Titania. That's right. So he went to Titania instead of Loki. So just these different shifts, and then they wake up in a pyramid in the desert. So Salura was my new continent. So Salura was at war, or starting to be, with Elise, and it is very high magic. It's high magic, kind of high technology. Basically, I was trying to make things as wild as I could think of. It's kind of like a capitalist paradise. It had this sorceress queen whose grandfather was a genie. I'm not going to go too far into detail on that, but it was very exotic. Probably the most bizarre. It was my attempt. I was like, if I wanted to do a tier 3 D&D place to do adventuring, what would I do? So basically it was that, where magic is just fucking ubiquitous, but it's still it's ubiquitous. It's a lot more common than in most of my places. Technology is integrated with magic. They do all kinds of stuff. It was a place where artificers fit in fine. Alchemy all over the place. Just crazy shit. and it's in the middle of a desert, and it's kind of an oasis. And they have a pact with nearby storm giant clans that like try and protect them from the roving giant worms and all this kind of shit. So like the whole place was just as I'm sorry, microphone, I didn't mean it. The whole place is just designed to be just pure death, for like anybody who's under the level of maybe 10, I would say. Um, and it was neat. Like someday I might take the time to really flesh it out and try and make it like a bona fide campaign setting for people, but I don't know if I will, just because at the same time I feel like in order to do that I would have to become like more at one with fifth edition, and I don't really want to do that. So the closest I might do is like make it Numenera adjacent. So anyway, they wake up there. They're in a pyramid. So Armamir is in this place, the son of the most rich people in Solura, basically. So the Vanderfell family. So they have all kinds of money. Armamir is basically like the mascot for them. So more or less like Mickey Mouse. If Mickey Mouse was a real person, then Armamir was basically Mickey Mouse. Um, so it was a completely different dynamic because now I was like, you can basically reinvent your character. Y'all are already like level 10. You can reinvent who your character is and how they fit into this place. And this is tier 3. So like, go crazy. And like, I kind of gave them like a chart where it's like, all right, if you have this much resources, then you get this much stuff and blah, 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 blah. So like, the less crazy shit you have at your disposal, the more magic items I give you and stuff like that. To try and like create a balance there. So Alexander wakes up back to the place where he's the master of the Thieves Guild, but it's under somebody else's control because he's been asleep for a year. That's how long they were captured. Avagandos is at that point, was still a bodyguard in the old place, but now is a bodyguard of Armamir. So the bodyguard for Mickey Mouse, more or less. And one of the ways that we kind of explained Avagandos' low intelligence was due to the fact that Armamir is like this entity, this like wild magic chaos thing that's just full of magical energy that he can barely control. And so, one time he accidentally like basically melts Avagandos' brain. It's hard whenever you got two A's. Yo, I also got Alexander too. So that was kind of how we explained that. So Avagandos had, brain melt, and then that's what brought the intelligence down significantly, and basically Armamir's family hired Avagandos as a bodyguard, kind of like out of pity, like, our kid fucked you up, so like, we're gonna make sure that you're taken care of so you don't get us in trouble. So that was how they kind of related. Huxley and his family, so we created a family for him of like performers. They were all performers, and that's kind of like what I was trying to do is basically there's like some truth to their lives that carried over into the other setting. So like the bodyguard thing, the performer thing for Huxley, all those kinds of things kind of like worked together. And so it's really kind of fucky, because it's kind of like some of it, it's like, was it real? Like how much was real? How much wasn't real? And all that kind of stuff. And it ended up being pretty cool. But so they do that. Oh, fuck. I'm trying to remember if there's anybody else. Chelsea's character was gone at that point. Alexander Avogandos. Oh yeah, and then Rudy was a little bit younger, but that was that covers everybody. So that was the group at that point. They wake up and they are in this pyramid. They go outside, and there is currently, and like basically while they're inside the pyramid, um, they were kind of like on these little platforms, and they had been under this curse. I had a really fancy name for it that I forgot, but they were under this curse, and for like a year, and it was this place that's really dangerous to get to. So it's like they were perfectly safe, and their bodies weren't dying or anything, but they were running out of time, and so the place starts shaking, and then so Armamir kind of remembers because Armamir was only under the spell for a very short period of time. Armamir actually went in to rescue them, and so there's their storm giant is outside battling this giant fucking ancient blue dragon, which I actually had the stats for it. It was I think I was using a mithril dragon. Pretty tough shit, and I was like, "Ooh, gonna be an awesome fight," But they were smart; they knew better. They actually they're like, "Okay, the guy, the storm giant is fighting for them, and all that kind of stuff, and we're going to take the opportunity to escape." So the dragon took some swipes at their horses. Some of their horses were wounded. Somebody hopped from one horse to the other, so they kind of doubled up, and they ended up getting out. It was a rough one. It was pretty close, but they got away. But the Norn tribesman, which was the storm giant, was killed in the process sometime after they got away. So that would be a debt that would come up later. Because I was trying to think of it, I was like, you have this tribe that they have this, honor code. They help the people in this civilization, even though they live outside of it. Like, what kind of tribe are they? And I thought about it. I was like, they would be like very honor bound. I'm thinking of kind of like, I don't know, like just very honor, kind of like I took a little bit of stuff from like Norse men, like the whole, if we let our liege lord die in battle and then we survive, and we're you have to go and be a wanderer, and shit like that. I kind of took a little bit of that. Anyway, so they go to Solura for the first time, and I kind of blew their minds with how crazy it was. Woo! They're like, what? It was pretty neat. And so we spent some time there where they're kind of like getting reoriented with what's going on there. They figure out that Alexander's guild has been taken over by somebody else, and they're just kind of picking up the pieces from everything. So we have this time where they're getting acquainted to everything that's going on. Basically, like I said, it's kind of like a capitalist utopia. And I wasn't being like heavy-handed anti-capitalism or anything like that. I'm not anti-capitalism, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't do it. It's a game, there are all kinds of very powerful families. The more money you have, the more likely you're tied into like magical research and like mercantile shit, which kind of makes you powerful in this place. They have all kinds of you can buy just about anything. So I involved slavery in a lot of my campaigns, and I can't remember if I had slavery in this one or not. I don't think we ever got to that point to figure it out. But anyway, that's beside the point. So what did they do after that? So they found out that Alexander's guild had been taken over, so that was kind of like subquest 1 was get the guild back. So he did some digging. He found out who was in charge. I kind of led him. I gave him the seed of the fact that one of his friends was killed, who his closest lieutenant was killed, taking care of the guild in his absence, and then this guy Roderick took over. So it's kind of setting Roderick up as like a villain. Meanwhile, the Vanderfell. It's hard not to get that mixed up. The Vanderfell family for them as a bit for Armamir to deal with. Um, had a feud kind of going, like, the corporate espionage, basically, with one of the other families that's kind of like trying to branch into the market of what the Vanderfells do, which is like basically weaponry. So applied magical technology into weaponry. So they made like just tons and tons of I figured I could use like wands, like wands of fireballs and shit like that. But I'm like, fuck that, we already got like a steampunky setting. We're gonna make it fireball guns, So I don't know if you ever played Final Fantasy Tactics, but it was kind of like that idea. You got somebody who can shoot a gun that like blows up, and there's like it's a spell inside the bullet. So that was kind of how we were going, except I used crystals instead of bullets. But anyway, because of that, there was some other shit involved. So there was a hit out on Armamir. But Armamir, because he's basically Mickey Mouse, is always in disguise in the city, basically, unless he's making a public appearance on purpose. So he doesn't get attacked by the paparazzi and all that. Avogandos is, of course, always by his side. I was going to use that as a thing where, like, his fan club is like, they know what Avogandos looks like, and they're gonna, if they ever see Avogandos, they're like, oh, he must be nearby, that kind of thing. It didn't quite come up. Rudy was basically like trying to look, like, try and find her old shinies and make sure they're still okay. And I felt like we were kind of getting somewhere there. We had this cool encounter where basically, she noticed that she was being stalked after she went and put her shinies in a deposit box, or she checked on them. And, it was just these thieves that were going to try and mug her for her locker key. But she outsmarted them and, took to the not to the ceiling, to the roof of these buildings, and then like called out real loud to get everybody's attention. And, man, she outsmarted them big time. And I think she like wild shaped into a cat and went somewhere they couldn't get to or some shit. It was very cool. But so there was that. Huxley and Rudy, they reconnected with their family. It was very touching. That ended up being a really nice thing about the campaign. A lot of D&D games, you don't really have a whole lot of family dealings that are like warm and like feel like an important part of the campaign. A lot of times you got a lot of fucking orphans in D&D, and it's kind of annoying, but I get it. So anyway, for Huxley, he's got like several siblings. He's got both parents, and then he's got his sister Rudy, who they adopted. There was really like a whole thing that we could have done with Rudy and her being adopted, like where she came from and all that. But unfortunately, Kaylee's life picked up. She had stuff to do, couldn't make the sessions anymore after a while. So no more Rudy. I basically, whenever she left, I was like, all right, Rudy's been kidnapped. We'll get to that later. So anyway, they do all these things. I can't remember why they left the city, but they left the city at one point. And what they did is, what did they do outside the city? Somebody's probably going to have to tell me. They left the city at one point, and while they were outside, they ended up being attacked while they were asleep, like when they were resting. Oh, no. This was before they even got back. So this was after the dragon thing. So they were resting before they even got back to the city. They were resting. It was late. And basically what happened was I rolled up a random encounter, and it ended up being this kind of fucking elf. It was an Eladrin is what it was. But Eladrin don't exist in my world. So whenever the player who plays Huxley was like, oh, it's an Eladrin, I'm like, you motherfucker, there are no Eladrins in my game. I'm just using the stat block. Shut up. He was able to figure it out, though. But anyway, so it was an Eladrin who attacked, and I was like, all right, so why would an Eladrin attack in the middle of the night? I was like, Armamir has a hit out for him. So Armamir is attacked. Armamir almost dies, actually. We actually got down to the nitty-gritty there. and Avogandos was awake and trying to defend Armamir, but it was very unsuccessful. He kept on rolling like shit and couldn't hit. Then everybody else eventually woke up, and whenever everything was going down, they managed to just barely kill this thing before this thing. It was a lady. They barely managed to kill her before she was able to kill Armamir. They found a card because, of course, that basically um, gave them an idea of who it was. Like it said Kukri PMC, which, because again, capitalism, I was like, I'm going to include private military groups. So, kind of gave them a lead. And they followed up on it. So they got back to the city. They kind of checked that out. They tried to figure out who it was. One of the things that kind of had me sad was like, basically, they were investigating and they got an address for where she lived, but they didn't go to it. And I was so bummed out. I was like, if y'all would have gone there, then we could have followed up on that and it would have been real interesting, all that kind of stuff. But they didn't do that. Instead, they went another route where Alexander put out a hit, or he was trying to put out a hit on somebody else. So in this setting, basically, to put out a hit on somebody, you have to meet with these lawyers that are devils to make sure that you have a legitimate reason to put a bounty on somebody. So it's this real kind of arbitrary process, but you have to go through the devil's red tape, and it's kind of like the society sees the potential for devils to handle law matters. So it was pretty entertaining, and unfortunately, it didn't really bear fruit the way that they're kind of hoping, and they didn't decide to go after the other thing. So that didn't quite pan out. So around this time, COVID started picking up, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of scared of this thing. Admittedly, like I really was like terrified of COVID because I'm not the lightest guy in the world. I am in my early 30s, but I'm not in great health. I'm not in wonderful health. So I was like, you know what? I don't know how long I'm going to be alive. So let's speed this up a little bit. So I threw some curveballs, and then things just kind of like went crazy. I was like, you know what, you guys, we're gonna try and conclude this thing within like 5 to 10 sessions. We ended up doing it in like three, I think it was like maybe 3 or 4. I feel like things just went really fast. But what basically happened was Lamaya, who is the empress, no, Sultana. She's the Sultana. Basically, they have a Sultana, uh, just because So that's who's in charge, and she was throwing a party. She's a friend of Armamir's, and she demands Armamir's presence, and they arrange entertainment. So Huxley's family does entertainment. All of this stuff worked together. They threw a great performance. It was a cool party. They ended up meeting a lot of the big wigs of the city. And there was this really awkward part where, because of the fact that Huxley serves Titania, he has a fairy from a previous campaign named Sunflower, who is constantly with him to make sure that he basically plays pranks on people and shit like that. So she's like, Huxley, you need to play a fucking prank. So he's like, all right, all right, all right, all right. So one of the things that he did was there is a real snooty girl who belonged to one of the other families, and like the big families. And he used Mage Hand to lift her dress, and I was like, oh shit. It's like I didn't know really how to handle that, and I was just kind of like gauging how everybody else was reacting, and they thought it was funny, but they were shocked too. But basically, I was like, yeah, she is pissed off. She doesn't know what the hell happened. She's embarrassed and she's leaving. So it was a thing. While they were there, because I didn't want to completely get rid of like elements from the previous campaign. I still wanted it to be a little bit connected in some way. Not the previous campaign, certain current campaign, but like before the reboot. There happened to be a senator from Elise that was present at the party, and they picked up on that big time. I just kind of like offered it there. It's just like, oh, it's a little something, and they're like, ooh. So Alexander ended up using his telepathy to fuck around with the guy, and convinced him through a lot of intimidation to go outside or kind of like go off to the side and have a talk with him. And so Alexander was able to get out of him that Knives was there on an excavation. So, and that he had hired people from the Thieves Guild. So basically, this was kind of tying back to the whole Seals of Abraxas thing. One of them involved getting a lamp, to be able to summon a genie. It's basically to bind a genie to your service was one of the things that they needed to do. So they picked up on that. That ended up being kind of like the primary place where the thing was going. So what they ended up doing was they followed up on that by figuring out where he went, how many people he took with him, that kind of thing. And they went to the temple where he was doing this digging, um, because it was, he knew that this thing was there. There were legends saying it was there, but it was um, very, very dangerous, to go there. Um, Basically, suicide for most people. And he hired all these thieves to be able to navigate the trials of the place. So it was going to be an interesting thing. They were going to get there, then they were going to see um, the the aftermath of all these thieves going through this place. It was bloody as fuck. um, what I didn't expect is that one of the artifacts that Huxley had allowed him to turn himself and the others basically into gusts of wind. So basically, if you use that, it kind of negates the whole temple experience. And they basically, so I was like, all right, if y'all are doing that, I'm going to do things a little bit different. So I put Knives and Roderick outside, waiting for the others to go through, or at least to get through most of it. And because Knives knew that they wouldn't be able to get the lamp. They would be able to get up to the lamp, but they wouldn't be able to get it because it is a whole bunch of shit. So they fly as wind up there. One of the things about the spell is after you turn back into normal, you're basically stuck, incapacitated for a minute. So they couldn't just like pop in there, fight Knives and whatever. They flew across the desert. They saw Knives and Roderick. And they decided to go into the temple while they were still in that form. So they did so. Some of them actually, they all did so. Basically, the way the temple is composed, it's a puzzle temple and it's full of traps. So it was going to be really cool. But the way that they did that, I was like, well, um, now I really don't have to worry about remembering all the details of the place because you can just fly through it. So it ended up being a situation where they, flew through this place and it was all the traps and everything were already sprung. There were some dead people here and there, but what they noticed was that in order to progress in certain places, people had to be sacrificed. So there were parts where there was obvious fighting, between the thieves. Then they sacrifice one of them, whoever loses, basically, and in order to move on. And that whenever you solve puzzles, that it actually moves the pyramid around like it's kind of like a Rubik's cube in a way. So you have to do things to change the composition of the place. So they work their way to the end of the temple as the wind form, and then they basically hear a bunch of shouting on the other side of a wall. So they asked, "Is the wall does it have any gaps or anything like that?" And I was like, "Well, it's not airtight." And then so they're like, "Oh, well, let's get on the other side." So they get on the other side, and they find that the shrine guardian is basically this fucking hideous monster. I used Lamentations of the Flame Princess's esoteric monster, random monster generator, or something. I can't remember what it's called, but basically that. It is awesome. Check it out. But I came up with this horrific monstrosity that they were fighting that was a total pain in the ass, and it was bizarre. So one of the things I should probably mention is I was using a lot more narrative referee techniques, I guess you would say, than I usually do. Usually, I try and aim for verisimilitude. I try and build everything a specific way, but in this case, I did a lot of improvising. So one of the things that they did was um, they decided all like basically some of them went over there. They were reappearing while the thieves are trying to fight to hold off this shrine guardian that's just slaughtering them. What they didn't know at the time, was that with every bit of blood that's spilled in the temple, it basically helps the shrine guardian be like actualize itself. When it does so, basically it opens a portal to the what's it called? The plane of water. Inside the plane of water, if you follow the murals on the wall in the temple, it tells you how to get to a lamp that is it belongs to a Marid, I think they're called, the water genie. But anyway, um, so all this killing is basically making it where they can get to the lamp. Um, and Knives knew that, so he was trying to use their bodies, for fuel in order to open it up and get his lamp. So, what Armamir decided to do was to go through the cracks in another spot, and then like try and see if he could figure out the mechanisms behind this place. So I was like, all right. So I kind of came up with this situation where there's this crystal that powers the whole place, and it's connected to this psychic guardian that's been there for centuries, part of an old race that connects to the whole place. And she's been doing this forever. She's lonely. She's tired. She wants to stop. She doesn't want to have to do this anymore. It's a pride for her people to be doing it, but she's just ready to be done. And what Armamir decided to do was to basically turn into a physical form, like on top of the ceiling where this crystal stuff is, and try and interact with it. So at this point, and up until this point, I really hadn't tinkered much with the whole concept of Armamir being like this chaos god, basically, that I had kind of thought of with um, the idea of Abraxas, and the idea of having this character that has too much magic energy for him to handle. So at this point, I was like, "Fuck it, let's draw a map here." So you have somebody that like can't really understand what they're doing, but they can just do stuff sometimes. So I use that as kind of like a method for Armamir to be able to communicate with this crystal lady. So that's kind of what happened, and I kind of we kind of fucked around with it a little bit, and basically the crystal like basically went inside Armamir and like his consciousness was kind of connected, and he ended up kind of taking the place of this guardian. But he could do it better because, like I said, crystal like chaos god or whatever. So then he had like the consciousness of this temple, and he's able to manipulate its form, to maneuver things, to look through things, all kinds of stuff. And it was really cool. It was kind of like he had access to the security room, more or less, but it was organic. So he entered the mind, or the from the perspective of the shrine guardian, was able to control it. And then Alexander knew this because Armamir told him. Probably a good time to mention that 3 of the characters have telepathy because 5th edition. So, well, actually, no. It's not because of 5th edition. Actually, they were using some playtest rules that I created for psychic powers. Only one of them initially had it. So, just from 5th edition itself. So, so we basically worked out all those rules, and then played around with them. We gave them to the characters and all that kind of stuff. So Armamir was using the telepathy in order to communicate to Alexander to let him know, hey, I've got control of this place now. And then he's like, oh, really? So he decided to pretend to, command it to do things. And then all the thieves were like, oh, they all bought into it, and it became just kind of a neat little thing. Um, because these are people that previously worked for Alexander mostly. Some of them were new faces, but most of them were old faces. And so they kind of did that for a bit. The killing stopped, and at that point, Armamir understood how everything worked. So um, then, because of the fact that shit wasn't really going down like it was supposed to, actually, no, that's not what happened. They concocted a plan to lure knives into this place and then just fuck them up with the temple itself. And it worked. So they sent somebody out there to draw him in. He came in, basically expecting that the lamp was ready to be retrieved, and then they trapped him in a room that they and he at that point knew that he was fucked. He ended up killing Roderick, who went in with him, in order to use his blood to basically create a teleportation sigil so he could get out of there. And he was about to do it, and then basically Armamir made the place flood with sand, so that and like move the tiles around of the place so he couldn't complete his sigil. And then he was just smushed to death. It was glorious. The players loved it, because it was great to see him die, and they made sure that there was no way that he could come back either, because he was very survivable. I kind of made him a lot more amorphous than he was before, so he was kind of more of like a pure demon at this point, rather than he was just like kind of a fucked up warlock before. So they killed knives. They left the place, and whenever they left the place, they went back home, and then I kind of commenced with some more fuckery. I was like, you know what? Let's end this very quickly. So I kind of like escalated the tension, I guess. So the next thing that happened was the corporate espionage stuff was underway still, and it wasn't really taken care of. Basically, the person from the PMC that was hired by Taka Industries. So Taka Industries was also the lady who was snubbed at the party. Who had her dress pulled up. That was the daughter of Taka Industries, family. So there were a lot of chances where if they would have like gone into more investigation to figure out who exactly hired the person from the PMC and all that kind of stuff, they would have been able to root out the subterfuge. They didn't do that. So basically, the Taka Industries people broke into the underground lab of the Vanderfells and basically fucked up the shit in there. And what they didn't know is that inside of that laboratory is the vials containing all of the blood over the years that they have been extracting from Armamir to keep him from like being as powerful as he can be. Basically, what everyone else doesn't know is that Armamir's parents have been conducting experiments on him for his whole life, and basically they were trying to usher in a new era and awaken the chaos god. But then they realized that they didn't want to follow through with it. They really love him. They and all this kind of stuff. They kind of like changed their mind over the years. They started extracting his blood and trying to make sure that they do so regularly, so that he doesn't build up enough potency, I guess, in order to grow to his full form. Because of the fact that they were afraid of what would happen to him. Well, whenever all that shit explodes, the blood wants to come back, so that's what it does. Basically, all this blood in miasma form basically flies into Armamir. Armamir grows into this giant god thing after splitting apart from himself. So the better part splits apart from the worst part. And then basically the god form just kind of like floats into the sky like this humongous zeppelin. And then the jester shows up again and fucks with them for a while and shows them actually a lot of things that happened, which really fucked with Armamir's head. Basically he was shown himself being a lab experiment, basically, that there were tons and tons of clones of him that kept on dying, that his family was working on him and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so in that time period, Aramir found out that he was a lab experiment, that there were all kinds of siblings of his that died, and that his family died in these blasts that happened because of this espionage. All kinds of stuff. It was a bad day. And he learned that he is a chaos god that's going to usher in a new, era of darkness on the world. Basically, there are two sides of the coin. There's the side of Abraxas that is chaos, and the side that is order. And I'm sorry, I hit the mic again. The order side is the one that gets rid of all the magic in the world. The chaos side is the one that just like blesses the world with magic. So, anyway, it's pretty obvious to see which side Armamir is. So basically, they had to either go inside of Armamir and the big one and kill him, or basically what would happen is he would wake up and just be this gigantic entity that wreaks havoc on the world. Either way, I was happy because I want my post-apocalypse game. Anyway, so that brought us to our last session. So, well, not entirely, actually. So I was pretty sure that one of those two things was going to happen. And that's kind of what they did. Armamir was distraught, but Armamir felt like he had to right the wrong. He had to kill himself, basically, in order to avert disaster on this place. So they kind of played along. The jester was like, I can get you in there, and I want to watch. And like he gave them some rules. Basically as a DM, I was able to just be like, all right, here are your parameters, because let's make this interesting. But ironically, and I have this session saved. It was called The Beginning of the End. Basically, they go into this place, which is a really fucking cool place. They go into the mouth of Armamir giant version, where there's this red versus blue war raging on. And I was all like, "Ooh, they're gonna pay attention. It's gonna be really interesting and all this kind of stuff." And then they're like, "No, we don't have time. We have to save the world." And I'm like, "Fuck, y'all are gonna find this super funny," but I completely understood. So they just kind of like sped past it, like Huxley summoned some giant owls, and they just flew on top of the owls. And then they went into the temple part, and the temple was on the inside, was actually so that there's the whole anatomy of them being inside of Armamir, like the giant version. They go in the mouth, and then the temple is like in the back of in the back of the throat area, and basically it goes down, and it's a place where the red team, I'm gonna call it, worships, and the blue team is trying to win. Actually, no, it's the other way around. The blue team worships, and the red team, which there are tieflings on either side, are trying to win back in order to gain the ground of this place. So they I created a dungeon for them, and I was like, we haven't had a good old dungeon crawl in a while. It turns out there's a reason for it, because this was a very fucking high level dungeon with all kinds of enemies and stuff. But the way that they played things out, and the way that the characters are built and the way 5th edition works, like they were able to overcome all of the challenges with hardly any challenge at all. And so it was really kind of funny more than it was anything else, because Alexander is over there with his reliable talent thing, because he's a level 11 rogue and a level 2 warlock. And he's got, so he can't roll lower than a 25 on like a lot of skills that he has proficiency or expertise in. And so he's just doing this phenomenal work with all this kind of stuff. He knows like all kinds, like he knew the exact languages he needed to know. And I was like, I knew that he knew one of them, but I didn't know he knew both of them. Because there are all kinds of eldritch creatures in here. Not eldritch, but like, well, yeah, I guess because they spoke deep speech, um, and there was a lot of primordial creatures, and so he was able to like communicate with most of them. And the way I created the dungeon was under the theme that they're just living there doing research. They're not really that like they don't really care that much about like killing anybody. They're or they'll just protect their own property. But basically, what the party was doing was they're like, "Oh, we're just passing through. We don't mean any harm or anything like that. We just need to get to the other side of this place." And I was like, "Fuck, they're not really gonna have any problem with that. This was my fuck up for making the dungeon like that. I just wanted to make it a real weird place because it's a chaos place and all this kind of stuff." And they are able to convince like anything there not to fight except for the undead, which couldn't be reasoned with. But they use some very clever spell use and things like that to basically, close those people off so they didn't even have to fight them. And so like this dungeon encounter or dungeon run that was supposed to take like probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, they fucking did in like 20 minutes. It was pretty glorious. It was pretty glorious. Like, I mean, I didn't like, there's a part of me that wanted to be mad because like I wanted them to have a cool dungeon run, but they just did the smart shit, and I can't blame them for that. So it actually was pretty cool. I think you'd have to ask them to know for sure because only the players know for sure. But it was enjoyable on my part, even if it did not go how it was expected. So then they basically get to the heart after going down the stairs that wind down the esophagus, and they go all the way down, and they carve into the heart cavity. Just carve, 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 all this kinds of stuff. Armamir is feeling the pain a little bit, but not really that severely. Then they get to the heart, and at this point, I'm just being crazy. So it's like you see like little spaceships basically flying around. I didn't describe them as spaceships, but just like little contraptions flying around, shooting lasers at each other and stuff. And they're just like, okay, well, we're just gonna keep going. So they kept on going. They got to the heart, and then so this was the moment where I had planned some serious fuckery. So the whole thing with Alexander is that he's a great old one warlock. So he got this power from Apokolothoth, which is an eldritch god. Straight out of one of the H.P. Lovecraft stories. That doesn't really have a whole lot of information in it, honestly. It's basically like, oh, there's this god, and the people worship the god, and they're kind of fucked up, but it doesn't really tell you much about it, so I had to flesh it out. But anyway, so he basically was contacted by his god and kind of like guided to use the blood from Armamir's giant chaos god body to basically summon Apokolothoth. So he does that, and meanwhile everybody else is like, what the fuck, dude? And Armamir is basically killing himself because for the better, for the sake of the world, it needs to happen, right? And Huxley is trying to stop it. He's the paladin, Green Knight, ancient one, not ancient one. What paladin of the ancients or whatever, Oath of the Ancients. So he, at the very last second, when Armamir's about to die, uses some healing on him, and Armamir's pissed off. Everybody's kind of like distraught. They don't know how to handle things because they don't want Armamir to die, but they know that it has to happen. Because basically when they're stabbing the heart, Armamir is getting hurt. So they realize those things are connected. And also, so is the Jester, so they're connected too. They also found out that the reason the Jester is the way he is because Armamir's parents sold the blood to him. So he's connected too. And he didn't take it. His body didn't take it very well. But anyway, so it was looking very bleak. Huxley said, fuck it, I'm going to heal you. Alexander did this thing, and I was like, you know what, dude, you got a fuck ton of warlock levels just now, because basically you finished your goal. You know, you're done. So you're level 20 warlock. And what I didn't anticipate was that that meant that he got a fuck ton new spells, and so he got remove curse. He used remove curse at like ninth level on Armamir. And I was like, I had to think for a moment. I was like, is this going to work? Because basically, what he was trying to do was sever the ties so that they could kill the God version without affecting the not God version. And I was like, you know what? It's like a level 9 spell. Technically, it is a curse, all these kinds of things. And fuck it. So it worked. And the curse was gone. They killed Armamir, the big version. The little version was just like, kill me too, because like he's just had a horrible run of events recently. And they basically, summoning Apocalypse blasted a giant hole in the body of the giant Armamir. They fly out the top of it. They get out, the thing just crumbles and breaks away, and they get out safely. And then we began the next episode. The last session was to come next. And for the life of me, I had no idea how this could play out in a good way. Even though technically Armamir didn't die, Armamir is like suicidal because everything that he's found out, he's just distraught as a motherfucker. And there really wasn't a whole lot of way to work their way out of that. And then there was Apocalypse, which has been summoned, so now there's a giant crescent moon in the sky. And pretty soon he'd be ushering in, darkness and madness for ages. Not really madness, because I'm not just ripping off Cthulhu. But it was going to be a very strict order, and Alexander was going to be one of the main enforcers, I guess. So that was kind of how that was supposed to go. And I didn't know what they could do to fix that. They did know where a lamp was, but I didn't know if they were going to remember to use it or to get it. So, yeah, that was kind of. I was kind of like, what are we going to do here? So, what ended up happening was we started the last session last night, and they were trying to kind of work everything out. There was it was very dramatic, like, because there was a lot of stuff, a lot of feels, a lot of things happened, and things didn't look very good. Huxley was basically like, all right, I'm getting my family out of this place. We're going to the Feywild because the material plane is fucked. So that was his plan. Alexander had his plan underway. Armamir wanted to die, and Avogandos didn't want to see that happen. So there was a good bit of time where they were trying to get that figured out. What ended up transpiring is they eventually came to realize that there is a lamp under that they're aware of. And similarly, Huxley decided, after like discovering what the deal with Avogandos was as far as the brain melting thing, because nobody really knew that that's what had happened. They just assumed that Avogandos was always slow like that. He was like, I could try this one spell, and so he had a diamond and he had greater restoration, and I was like, you know what? In this world, it's not a gimme. You're gonna have to do some shit. So they did this elaborate ritual. There was a lot of people involved, and that's what the spell does. Is it gets rid of, like anything that, like something that debilitates your ability scores. It's meant for, like if you get your brain sucked by, not sucked, but like trying to, what is it? Intellect devours. If you become not quite dead, but like catatonic from one of those things, they can fix you. It can fix you. So, it worked. So Avogandos was fixed. Huxley and his family left, and then and it was a cool ritual. I like to do those. Anybody who runs D&D 5th edition, there's a lot of spells that are like high power spells that do very powerful things. and I don't like to do them for free. I like to make a big deal out of it. So, if you can have them do elaborate rituals where they have to do really cool things, that is much for the better. So, um, anyway, so that happened. Then they decided to go after the lamp. They came up with this very elaborate contract to make sure that they asked for precisely the correct thing. And so what they did was they went into the plane of water. They grabbed the lamp. They summoned the genie, and basically what they asked for was to have all of the knowledge and power that they have now, but to have it before all this shit happened, basically after Knives was dead. So they did that, and because of the fact that at that point Armamir understood what his situation was, he was able to prevent the Chaos God coming out. He was able to control things. He took control of the Jester, all those kinds of things. They fixed Avogandos in the past. They stopped from summoning the Apocalypthoth. So it kind of like it fixed all of those things. And then, so because of the fact that, we were basically at the end of the campaign, I was like, all right, so what do your characters do from that point on? So Huxley ended up basically becoming a very fabled Green Knight type character, just doing the bidding of Titania for the rest of his days, which he's immortal. So, it's a long time. At least whenever the next campaign in that world starts, he's still going to be doing his thing. Avogandos and Armamir went off and repaired a lot of the damage that was done. After Knives died, Elise had lost one of the main leaders because the mob runs the show. So there's some stabilization efforts that had to happen there. There's, some stuff that had to be fixed with the Norn tribe after that one storm giant died. I'm really kind of sad they never ended up fighting the dragon, but that's okay. It still ended up great, I would say. And Rudy came back. They brought Rudy back, and she's dead set that she got rid of the curse on the manor, even though what actually happened is they took care of the jester, so that wasn't really the case. But we really didn't iron out what happened with Rudy, but I'm sure she probably went with Huxley. And so anyway, after the sorting of affairs, eventually Avogandos and Armamir, who they had a long-standing will they, won't they throughout most of the campaign that started all the way back in Elise. It was just this moment where I think it was Avogandos picked up Armamir for a moment to help out, to rescue him or something. And it just kind of went on. And so one of the things I mentioned on my tweeter is that basically I usually don't like having PC romances in games unless it's handled properly. And to me, properly is in a way that doesn't detract from what the other players are doing. So you don't want to have this, we're going to have a scene every session kind of thing. Instead, it's more a little bit of flirtation here, a little bit of something here, it's something kind of sweet. It doesn't take a whole lot of time or anything like that. That way things keep moving. You don't want to have people disengaged from what's going on. And, to me, they handled it perfectly. I mean, it was great. It was precious, and the loyalty was wonderful. At the end of it, basically, Avogandos kept on asking for them to get married, and Armamir kept on saying no until everything was kind of sorted, and they spent some more time, in these capacities. And so the game ends finally with a glorious wedding. So with Huxley presiding over the affair, Alexander being a best man, and Rudy probably using her birds to be flower girls, sort of, or her herself being a flower girl. So it was precious. It was a great ending, and one of it's the only positive, really positive ending I've ever had in a campaign. Usually it's very neutral. It's bad shit happens. We survived. We're legends now, but it's not. It's never this positive. So it was really nice, completely unexpected, and I'm going to miss it. These characters are wonderful. So that is them on the screen. You have Rudy on the left. That's the burb that Kaylee played phenomenally. Um, Basically, like she would fluff up at danger and just like kind of like crow at things, kind of like in alarm fashion. It was great. She loved her shinies, and it was awesome. The next one over is Armamir, and I've already talked about Armamir. The next one over is Avogandos, the Drow, and then you have Alexander, and then you have the good old Huxley, who is basically the dad of the group. Like it was kind of an in joke from the very moment he joined because he was just looking after everybody so much. And then you have me up there on the top, the evil DM, presiding over all of the affairs and being a maniac. So that was actually drawn by Matt, who plays Armamir, or played Armamir. It's weird to say that in the past tense, but it is over now. So yeah, it was a great game. The campaign probably went on for a year, I think, which is pretty standard for me. Usually my campaigns last for about a year. Um, but good times, good times. So that's pretty much it. Leave a comment if you have a question about the campaign or anything like that, or if you stuck out this long, then you're either crazy or you're busy with something and you're just listening. So thanks for paying attention, and have a good one. Take care of yourself.